What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are 3 weeks away from being done with our preview season. I'm actually going to make a playlist on YouTube and on Spotify, so you can go back and listen to all of our preview episodes if you've missed them. But this week, we got the Pac-12 South, and I'm pumped.
This is great. It's not like we're trying to get rid of these. It's just the good news is once these are done, the season's here. So really it's just a culmination of excitement. We're crescendoing to the season. So I'm looking forward to it. Pac-12 South, it's a fun one to pick. And then we got the SEC starting next week.
And it's August. And it just
Football
hit
this
me.
month.
Yeah, because I'm like, the more of these we get done, you said, the closer we are to football. And this month, we have a Big Ten game. Like, there's a real Power 5 game going on, Illinois and Nebraska, August 28th.
So every week, starting this week, with a meaningless preseason NFL football game, but starting this week, every week through the first week in February, we have a football game. So that doesn't suck. That doesn't suck.
That doesn't suck. That is a reason to get up in the morning is we got football.
Because this Hall of Fame game, I believe this week, I think it's Cowboys and Steelers, if I'm not mistaken. So that'll be, they'll play the second string to start the game, and then it'll be third and fourth and maybe even fifth string. So, but I'm here for it. So every week from now until February, we got something to watch. So let's do it.
Right. Let's dive into the Pac-12 South. We have, as we've done with the other conferences, we will go in order of predicted finish by you and me. And we'll talk about the win totals for each team, why we picked them the way we've picked them. Let's dive right in and predicted order of finish. Number one in the division, the defending Pac-12 South champion, USC Trojans. Now, USC's win total set at 8.5, which when I first looked at it, now I've been high on USC, so that looked real low to me, but 8.5 the win total. Daniel, what are your thoughts on the Trojans?
Yeah, so we try to look at this thing holistically. You and I do a few different things as far as when we start picking these games. Our process, we like to just throw darts at the board at first and say, hey, bird's eye view, how do they feel? And then we look at their schedule, we look at their team and kind of see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, we make adjustments, go through our process. This is one where when you told me the win total expectancy, I was like, is the Pac-12 that good that's going to keep USC from winning enough games, especially the Pac-12 South? I think if they're in the North, you could pencil in maybe a couple more losses or challenging games, but we'll get to that. But as far as offense goes, they returned 7 starters on offense and they returned 6 on defense. Definitely, a talented team. Just brought in the 7th ranked recruiting class in the nation. But it's funny, when you bring in the 7th ranked recruiting class, you wouldn't think that you would have 9 transfers coming in. And these are all from pretty big schools. Obviously you got Ishmael Sosfer from Alabama, a defensive tackle transferring in. You've got Xavier Alford, safety coming in from Texas. Malcolm Epps, a tight end from Texas. And then obviously Keontae Ingram, running back from Texas. And then a wide receiver, Jake Smith from Texas. So bringing a lot of Texas over. But definitely they're bringing all these transfers. And honestly, for me, Jacob, that means more for depth than anything. That means that if this guy's your number 2, then he's played college football before and at another big-time level, and he's, if nothing else, pushing these other guys. So offensively, obviously, you're going to start with Keaton Slovis, his junior year. He took a little bit of a regression step back last year. I say that. They went 5-1, and they won the South, and they went to the championship game. But I just don't I think that he has a lot of ceiling left to be had after what we saw his freshman year. So Keaton Slovis, Drake London's going to be the number one wide receiver back. You've got Brew McCoy, who's in now, probably going to.
I'll say breaking news as of today.
Oh.
Brew McCoy suspended. So I pulled up the article I was reading. Domestic violence, arrested. So
Yikes.
he's out on bail, but the team has suspended him indefinitely while they investigate. If there's any truth to it, he won't be playing this year. So
yeah, that would be over at that point.
And this is literally 5 hours ago. So this is this is very fresh. But yeah, I'm with you because I was going to talk about Brew McCoy as well. But sorry for the breaking news.
It's a good thing. No. I'm glad you said that because I may have dove in a little too much on old Brew McCoy. But they brought in several transfer wide receivers. I know I just listed a bunch of transfers, but KD Dixon, a wide receiver from Colorado, Taj Washington, a wide receiver from Memphis, and then Jake Smith, wide receiver from Texas, transferring in. These are all former 4-stars that are transferring in. And I just think that this is going to go a long way as far as supplanting what they lost in Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Vaughns. And you really need that wide receiver room to be strong. They've got 4 out of 5 offensive linemen back. Keontae Ingram, honestly, is a huge, huge get from Texas because I think that he can really balance out their offense. And with this offensive line having a bunch of returning starters, he might be able to come in and kind of help Slovis kind of, take some of the pressure off of him. Now, defensively, they're bringing in Corey Foreman, who is number 1 player in the country, number 2 player by some estimates, but defensive end, 5-star from Southern California, was rumored to be going to the SEC. And then it kind of looked like the NIL stuff was going to happen this year. And I think that may have been what drew him to stay in USC because, he's the biggest fish in, one of the biggest cities on the biggest team. And, that means a lot. So I think he comes in and think he kind of has a Kayvon Thibodeau effect like at Oregon where he just comes in right away and is, just blows it up on the defensive line. And if that's the case, then, what do you need to win? You need good quarterback play, good wide receiver play, and a good pass rush. And, those are the ingredients that I think USC already kind of has. So only my biggest question, Jacob, is Clay Helton the guy to get them there? So
I think you look at my notes. My first bullet point, I said, you've got the best quarterback in the conference, the best wide receiver group in the conference prior to the Brew McCoy news, best defensive line in the conference. And you and I have talked about if you're going to have 3 positions that like matter the most, those are your top 3. And they've got the best of all of those in the whole Pac-12. So the schedule sets up nicely. They avoid Oregon and Washington out of the North. They have 7 home games, and the Pac-12 finally got smart. They're trying to help their best teams win. They play all Saturday games, whereas like last year they had that, play it on a Saturday. Pac-12 championship was on a Friday, like away from home, and Oregon had like 2 weeks rest.
You're trying to make excuses for my Oregon Ducks coming in and making sure that I was the picks champion last year between the 2 of us. Shout out Oregon. Appreciate you.
But this is not the first time this has happened where Pac-12's best teams have lost on a short week on a Friday. And it's like they shoot themselves in the foot with the scheduling. So
people are going to watch USC anyways. Do not put them in a primetime like weeknight game. Put that Colorado or
put
Utah
Stanford and Oregon State on a Friday night.
Right.
And I'll watch it. Like I'm watching USC regardless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a game. Yeah. Anyway, we're on the same page there. They should be favored in 11 or 12 games. The game I wouldn't favor them is at Notre Dame on the road, but we're picking them to win that game. And so at an 8.5 win total, I'm looking at this and going, this seems like a slam dunk. This team has a 12-0 ceiling. like legitimate 12-0 ceiling. I want them to be really good. I am dying for USC to be really good, but I'm in the same boat you are in that I just do not trust Clay Helton to win every game that he should. Even if they win a game they're not going to be favored in, I don't trust them to win every game they should. And so, do I think they can run the table in the Pac-12? I don't. I wish they would, but I don't. Like, do I see them losing like to UCLA late in the season? They could. Like, they're not above that. And I'll say this: as I'm looking at the win total, a lot of people, you bet over or under on these win totals. Vegas wants even money on both sides. If this team goes 8-4, Clay Helton deserves to be fired. 8-4 is fireable at this point. I think 10-2 and losing the Pac-12, like you go 10-3, and you could even like it's still a conversation with because this team's good. Like you mentioned, they're talented. They had to bring in those transfers because the recruiting class 2 cycles ago was awful. They just recruited a top 7 class. They're going to thrive off of NIL. This is a program that, with the right coach, is a national title contender every year because they have no one to compete with locally out there for recruits. Nobody. And if they're good and they can keep, 60% of the kids home in Southern California, they're going to be a top 5 class every single year.
With this NIL, it's really a turning point for teams like this, and it's something that we could really see, kind of be a correction to what we've seen in the past with them. So not that they haven't been recruiting at a high level, but maybe specifically the Southern California kids staying home, which would be big for them and their marketability. Speaking of marketability, what we want you to do is go follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod, both on Instagram and Facebook. You can follow us on YouTube. Best way to do that is go to our link tree on both of those platforms, and then go there, subscribe, hit the notifications bar so you can see us. Interact with us on Twitter. Tell us we don't know anything. Tell us what we do. Just comment. We love that. And then obviously you can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, but specifically on Apple Podcasts, where most of our listeners are. You could leave us a 5-star review. That helps us to get recommended, helps us to keep bringing the content that we bring. And then, put something in there that you want us to talk about. We're happy to look into that on our next mailbag pod or just during the season. We're getting close to the season. We'll be talking about a lot of things. So do that. We'd love to jump in with you.
Nice transition. And I didn't mention we are picking USC to go 10-2, 7-2 in conference, which will be good enough to win the Pac-12 South. If you're USC, is that what you want long term? Is 10-2 and is 10-2 good enough? Because in my opinion, if you're USC, the Pac-12 needs you to be the best team in the conference. They need you to be going 11-1, 12-0. So 10-2 for USC. I'm rooting for them. I would love to see them make the playoff. That would be great for college football.
I'm curious that, this is a whole nother podcast, but 30 seconds on it. I think that if we see a coaching change here, we talked about like Gus Malzahn and all this with Auburn. Who are you going to get? Who's the next best guy? Who do you go to get? Because USC is a specific fit, and you saw Texas kind of tailor that and go get Steve Sarkisian, who is a guy that we think might be a really good fit there. Who is that fit at USC, and can they do it? And then on top of all that, like, how are they going to weather any potential realignment stuff? Because money, NIL, and then conference realignment that's shaking everything up, you're going to see that start to affect coaching. Now, USC is one of these big fish that should not affect them specifically, but as far as coming to a Pac-12 conference where, they're probably going to have the least amount of revenue of the other conferences. So something to look at there. But yeah, you got to zero in on someone before you fire Clay Helton, but you're keep hitting your head on the ceiling with him. So that's something to consider.
Who's your guy for USC? Is it James Franklin? Like,
I was going to say Lane Kiffin as a joke, but because, it's like,
bring Lane home, baby.
Yeah, they'll leave him on the tarmac again. Like, there's just too much history there as far as that goes. But
Hey, Ole Miss wins double-digit games this year, and that wouldn't all of a sudden be a joke. Just saying.
You know what might be something that this is. Well, everybody hates him, but Bill O'Brien is the OC at Alabama right now, and I mean,
Oh, he's in that Nick Saban
he's
rehab.
he's he's getting that car wash clean. I'm not saying it's a good move. I just know that everybody in Houston hates him, and so him being a leader of an organization again, I don't know, but I mean, whatever.
Let's move on. Next in the division, we've got the Utah Utes. Utah, a team that in 2019, going into the Pac-12 championship, controlled their own destiny. They win that game, they go to the playoff. Last season, I mean, coming off of a 3-2 season, again, COVID affected the Pac-12 worse than any other conference. Win total also set at 8.5, so equal with USC. Utah, this team's been very consistent the past few seasons. Kyle Whittingham's just built a monster at Utah. What are we expecting from the Utes this year?
Yeah, so as long as Winningham is there, I feel like they have a high floor. I think that he's just a very strong coach. He's shown that to have that pedigree over the years, and then when he's got the team to kind of do it, he can kind of cycle up and win the South. I don't. It's tough to tell if it's just because their floor is so high that sometimes that intersects USC, falling beneath them, or if it's just that they actually have risen up and been better than USC. I know that's more or less semantics and trying to figure out everything like that, but if USC is what it's supposed to be, then I don't think we talk about Utah as fondly as we have been. I guess that's my point. But as far as this season goes, I mean, they're returning 10 starters on offense. They're returning 8 starters on defense. So you'd look at it initially, and after last year being a year in which they were one of the worst in returning production, this year they're having much more than before. And so that's something to keep in mind. Now, they also are bringing in 8 transfers, and this is kind of a fun thing to me when we talk about teams and kind of it is like free agency and seeing who came from where. They've got a guy here, they've got a guy there, but bringing in some former 4 stars, a couple of defensive players from Washington, bringing in a safety and a linebacker, um, and they bring in 2 former 4-star running backs, one from Oklahoma and TJ Pletcher, and one from LSU and Chris Curry. Now, I think that's a big deal because of the brand of football that Utah likes to play. The Of the 10 returning starters, they're mostly, I mean, they return, 2 receivers, all 5 offensive linemen, tight end. They start 2 tight ends, so both their tight ends are returning. So that's kind of what's going on. Charlie Brewer transferring in from Baylor. He's a good player. I think he can win football games. I think he's kind of exactly what I expect a Utah quarterback to be. He has just unfortunately had a lot of injury trouble and more specifically concussion issues. So if he can stay healthy, which the offensive line, like I said, 5 starters returning, if he can stay healthy behind that offensive line and rely on that running game with a couple of good backs that they just got in, then I think that they could have a pretty good year by Utah standards and win, 9-10 games and be a factor in the Pac-12 South. If he gets hurt, they're going to kind of middle out, I think. And I think they're going to be a little more of, hey, we're a good team that's going to go to a bowl game, but we're not a team that can challenge for any sort of postseason as far as the Pac-12 championship or anything like that. So good team, though.
Utah will go as far as their quarterback takes them. And
Right.
last year, they had to replace a 3-year starter in Tyler Huntley, who, I mean, he's backing up Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. So great quarterback. And Cameron Rising just wasn't it last year. So you mentioned they bring in Charlie Brewer, and he's an upgrade over Cameron Rising. And so they'll go as far as the quarterback takes them. I think Charlie Brewer can, like you said, win them some games. Returning production, you mentioned they're 8th in the country. returning production defensively, which is, Kyle Whittingham has consistently had a good defense at Utah. They rank 5th in the country in defensive returning production. They might have the best combined offensive and defensive lines in the conference. Like between both lines, probably the best line unit in the whole conference. Schedule wise, it lines up nice. 3 of their 4 toughest games are at home, and they get USC after a bye. And so schedule lines up nicely. And then I look at, the last 5 seasons, they won 9 games, 7 games, 9 games, 11 games, COVID season. So we're just going to go right back to 9 wins. And we're picking Utah to go 9-3. They're going to win a lot of the games they're favored in. They're going to lose a couple they're not favored in, and they're going to surprise somebody. So we actually have them. Well, we haven't beaten the next team we're going to talk about, but USC. That's right. Did we pick up the USC? Yeah, off the bye at USC.
Yeah.
So again, we don't think USC is good enough to win every game they should, and we expect Utah to come in, win that game. But 9-3 is what we're picking over that 8.5 win total for the Utes. Let's go back to Southern California. UCLA. UCLA is a team that, like, Chip Kelly came in and everyone trashed the hire after that for his first couple of seasons. And then last year, the team looked a lot better. And so is there some belief in UCLA? We have them 3rd in the division, so we're believing something good about UCLA. Daniel, give me your thoughts on the Bruins.
Yeah, so they're one of these teams that is very slow going, and Chip Kelly reportedly was slow playing his recruitment of players, and he was just trying to find the right guys and develop them, which is code for I can't get the top guys. And so, they spend all this money on their training and their nutrition and all these kinds of special things. And I remember thinking, like, all that's great, but like if you don't got players, having the best food is only going to make these average players a little higher than average. Like they're not going to be elite football players. They're not going to run 4.5s and these kinds of things. But the quickest way is to figure quarterback out. And I think he's done that. Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback, he is coming back for his senior year. He had a good year last year in that shortened season. 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 picks. But he's also a running threat, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Again, it was a shortened season. They didn't play a ton of games. I expect him to be kind of an everything quarterback again. But really, it's what's around him that I'm more excited about. The fact that they have 9 returning starters on offense, 10 on defense. They're very high, I imagine, on the production chart of what's coming back. And so that's why we ended up being high on them. Bringing in a couple of transfers, but anytime you see a transfer coming in from Alabama, that's pretty big. It's Ali Cahoe, a 4-star inside linebacker coming in. Ethan Garber's a 4-star quarterback transferring from Washington. So, you've got someone to be in that quarterback room with DTR, push him, and maybe be the heir apparent. Cam Brown, 4-star wide receiver from Texas A&M, and you got safety Jordan Heath from Notre Dame coming in. So you've got some high-profile guys coming in. Again, for this, I imagine this helps the 2 deep more than anything. You don't expect these guys to just come in and be starters off the street necessarily. Those are usually your higher impact transfers, but these guys can come in and play some meaningful time, and they're going to help your overall team aspect. They probably help special teams a lot. They help, these other things that kind of go unseen. They might not play a bunch of snaps offensively or defensively for you, but that's always big. Bringing in these guys, especially from other big schools. Zach Charbonnet, Michigan transfer, 4-star running back. I think that he's going to be a factor in the backfield alongside Britton Brown. So definitely want to see what these guys have in store.
UCLA, we're really high in UCLA. Last season, in their 4 losses, they never lost a game by more than 6 points. So, and like in every loss, like their biggest loss, the first game against against Colorado, excuse me, they lost by 6. Like after that, they lost by 3, 4, and 5. Like
Yeah.
they were within striking distance in every game they lost. So it's a team that the ball bounces a different way, and next thing you know, you're 5-2, and that looks a lot different. So some momentum building off of last year. Returning production, second in the country. Only Louisiana has more returning production than UCLA does. If the offense limits turnovers, this could be one of the best offenses in the Pac-12. You mentioned DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's probably the second or third best quarterback in the conference behind Keaton Slovis. And he reminds me a lot of, I'll try to make a Chip Kelly comparison here. Darren Thomas at Oregon, that Oregon team that went to the national championship against Auburn. He was that quarterback from like 2009 to 2011. So all 3 of those seasons. Darren Thomas, like great runner, like great arm strength, not the most accurate, but like a lot of talent, and was really perfect for Chip Kelly's offense. I think DTR is that kind of quarterback. Schedule's really tough. Now we're picking UCLA to go 8-4. Their win total set at 7, right above that 7 win total. So to be at 8-4 with this schedule, we're really high on UCLA because they play LSU early. That game is at home, but they get Oregon and Washington out of the north. They get Utah and USC on the road. Now USC, it's across town, but so like their toughest games in the South are on the road. They get LSU out of the SEC. They get Oregon and Washington out of the north. So for us who pick an 8-4, we're really high in UCLA. And for Chip Kelly, who came in and went 3-9, 4-8, and 3-4, to go 8-4 this year, that's a breakthrough season.
Right.
Now we're talking about Chip Kelly is back, really, and that's going to have momentum for recruiting. And you've mentioned NIL being in Southern California. There's money to be made in Southern California. So this is fun. I want UCLA to be good again. I want USC and UCLA to be coming in with 1 or 2 losses each, and that game be an exciting, beautiful, meaningful color-on-color matchup. I'm all about
it does look good.
That's what it's all about. I want it to be meaningful when I watch that beautiful uniform game, because I'm watching it regardless. But let's have it be meaningful. Let's have them both be ranked. That would be huge for UCLA in year 4 for Chip Kelly. Let's move on to the biggest wild card in this conference.
Right.
Arizona State. This is a team, when we talked way back in the spring, you and I are talking like, is this a top 15 team? Like they're in our top 25 for sure. Are they in our top 20? Do they sneak up in the top 15? Are they finishing 10-2? Are they beating out USC this year? All these high expectations. And then the stories start dropping. And Arizona State was illegally, having recruits on campus during the COVID dead period, which was over a year long. And, Herm Edwards is involved. Apparently there's video. There's a whole dossier that was that people on the inside who helped make it happen, like, released. And, we haven't seen the end of this story yet. Therefore, biggest wild card, because the roster didn't get decimated. Only one coach has been let go. And so this is still the same team that we're sitting here going, are they winning this division? Are they going 10-2? But it's so hard to know what's going to happen with Arizona State this season. So what are your thoughts on the Sun Devils?
So it's one of these things where it got to be so hard. I just kept asking you, all right, if this stuff wasn't going on, what will we pick them as? What are they? And then what is the effect? What are they and what is the effect? I think that we probably would have landed somewhere in the 9 win total with them had everything been normal. And, we're high on Jaden Daniels. I think you're talking about Dorian Thompson-Robinson being 2 or 3. I think Jaden Daniels in that conversation as well as being a top 3 or 4 quarterback in this conference. At his best, probably he's the second quarterback, maybe first. He's got some talent. And then obviously Herm Edwards, just kind of out of nowhere as a college coach, we didn't really expect this turnaround. They're doing a pretty good job of recruiting. They're bringing in some 4 stars, and, they brought in 7 transfers. Jacob, I'm not sure if this is going to be one of those feelings of, you remember Ohio State, Urban Meyer's first year? He came in and they were on probation, right? And it was just like perfect though, because everybody said, oh, Urban Meyer, his system with Braxton Miller at quarterback is just perfect. And then what do? They went undefeated. They had a postseason ban, so they would have represented obviously in the Big Ten championship. They didn't get to, and they probably would have been in the national championship picture if not win it that year. They had a great year. I think it was 2013, 2012, something like that.
12.
2012, yeah. So they were in the picture, but or they would have been in the picture. Part of me, not that this is the exact same scenario or anything like that, because they kind of felt like they were cheated out of something because it was kind of a dumb. Now it wouldn't be an issue because players got tattoos because of their name, image, and likeness. So whatever. So they kind of felt us against the world mentality. I'm wondering if there's any sort of juice like that in this locker room right now. Hey, us against the world, and they come out and prove some people wrong and kind of win no matter what, whether there is going to be a postseason ban for them, whether there is going to be sanctions eventually, whether they're going to eventually wipe away these wins or whatever they end up doing. You know, you never know nowadays with what each team's going to get served with. But is there some of that fight in this team? Do they follow Herm Edwards kind of, through thick and thin, or is this a team that kind of middles around and doesn't, maybe that the bottom doesn't fall out, but they don't really you know exceed expectations or anything like that just because of where they're placed. Jaden Daniels, I've already mentioned him once or twice, but he's a really good quarterback. This is his third year. This is what you would expect to be his money year. Like, he's going to play this year and potentially have an NFL future. This would make him eligible for the draft after playing this season. So you think that if you're in his position, you want to play well and then get out before everything hits the fan, if that's a possibility for him. So I also think that they've got they've got some talent up and down this roster. They've got 7 returning starters on offense, 8 on defense. Most of the offensive line is back, 4 out of 5 starters. Defensively, the whole back end is there. The whole defensive backfield. They returned their top 5 rushers from last year, their top 4 pass catchers. So for me, it's like the guys are still there for them to still do it. Are they going to do it? And we kind of docked them a couple games because of the surrounding questions.
Yeah, you got to shoot for the middle when you don't know. So,
Right.
this is a team that could go 10-2. This is a team that could go 4-8, for all I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I heard Bud Elliott talk about this today, actually, and it made me feel better about our pick. So he said there's a gap between the talent they've recruited and their results in the field. And so I looked it up. Recruiting wise, they've recruited really well. Team talent composite last year ranked top 30, which is second in the Pac-12 South. And they have not played like they're head and shoulders talent wise above everybody else. So there's a little bit of it like a lack of development. And I know it's early on in Herm Edwards' tenure, but if they've been dealing with all the off the field stuff this offseason, how much development has gone on with that team if they're having to deal with all of this? Last year, they ranked 100th in passing success rate. So they weren't explosive with their offense of the year. Run defense last year ranked 119th in success rate allowed. And so I know it was a shortened season, but small sample size, but still not great statistics. 3 of the 4 toughest games are on the road away from home. But you mentioned it. The talent is there on the roster. The returning production, they're ranked 11th in the country. So we've mentioned this. Pac-12 as a whole, very high with returning production compared to other conferences. But
Right.
they've got enough of that to win the division. But the unknown are going to throw some toss-ups the other way for us. So 7-5 for Arizona State. I really could see him going 9-3. I really could see him going 4-8. So We'll,
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes. We're going to shoot the gap and say 7-5 for Arizona State, 4-5 in conference. Let's move on to a team that maybe is surprised that this far down here for how well they performed last year, but Colorado, their win total set at 4.5 after winning, I believe 4 games last year. Yeah, after winning 4 games last year in a 6-game season. So 4.5 win total in a 12-game season seems low, or is it, Daniel?
Yeah. So for all these other teams in the Pac-12 that are returning a bunch, it seems like they are returning the least amount that we've actually covered so far. Carl Durrell, this is his second year as a head coach. So as head coach at Colorado, so coming into his second year, 6 returning starters on offense and 6 on defense. Um, I'm interested to see kind of the progression. Sam Neuer played most of the year at quarterback last year. It looks like Brandon Lewis is taking over for him. Sam Neuer kind of had a mediocre season, but they returned 3 out of 5 offensive linemen. They returned their starting running back Jarek Broussard. He's probably the biggest bright spot. Broussard had almost 900 yards rushing in 6 games, so that's huge. They definitely leaned on the run game. Neuer was more of a runner. He had 200 yards last year. He and Broussard both had 5 rushing touchdowns. So that's kind of the game. Interested to see how that goes going forward, if that's sustainable, what that looks like over the course of an entire season. I think it's huge to have Broussard back and to have 3 out of 5 offensive linemen back. So I think that's good for them. The bad thing is that most of these other teams have much more coming back and are just better. And I think that COVID may have helped a team like Colorado be better amongst their peers, because it's kind of an equalizer. It's like when you playing some great athletes, you go play in some sand or something. It's like nobody's quite as fast. So I think it kind of slowed everybody down. So they could kind of capitalize when people weren't paying attention. So um, I don't think the bottoms fall out. I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado made a bowl game this year. I'll be honest. If they went 6-6, I mean, great for them. The way they played last year, that'd be interesting. But you got to start taking everything into consideration with their schedule, which they got some out of conference issues, and then everything in conference as well.
Yeah, we're picking Colorado to go 3-6 in conference.
Right.
So if you had a bunch of cupcakes out of conference, that's a bowl
That's
team.
7 wins. Yeah.
So, but they don't. So, last year 4-2 wins were against, no disrespect to these teams, but UCLA by 6, Stanford by 3, San Diego State by 10, and Arizona, who Arizona State beat 70-7. They won that game by 11. So, and then after they go 4-1, the best 2 teams they played, they lost by 17 to Utah. They lost by 32 to Texas. So it kind of put it in perspective that it was a weird year for Colorado. But yeah, this is a team that could be 6-6, but schedule wise, they get Minnesota and Texas A&M out of conference, and I don't think they're winning either of those games. They play Texas A&M in Denver, but let's be honest, Texas A&M is going to travel to that game. That's going to be a little Kyle Field.
Yeah.
Kyle Field at Mile High Stadium.
It's going to be Mile High Kyle.
That's right. They play Oregon and Washington out of the North. So purely based on schedule, it's going to be a rough season. But returning production, 12th in the country, they can take a step forward and have a worse record. So Carl Durrell already had a bad, like not a bad job, a rough situation with his job. Given especially when he was hired last year, this was the last Power 5 coach to be hired. Because remember, Mel Tucker left like after signing day. Then Colorado had to start their coaching search. So for him to do what he did last year is very commendable. This can be a year where you build and have a worse record. So 4-8 for Colorado. And let's move on to the bottom of the conference. Arizona, man. I mean, this will be the worst team in the Pac-12. there is a lot to work on at Arizona on and off the field.
Yeah, last and least, as you famously say every time we get to these. So, um, yeah, it's just it's tough because even if they were returning a bunch of starters and everything, it's to a team that went 0-5 last year. Jed Fish taking over. It's tough to see that transition just yet. These first year head coaches, the job has just gotten so much harder to be a new coach in that first year, especially if you're already projected to be behind these other schools. So, um, 5 returning starters on offense, 7 on defense. Uh, I think that it's going to be important for them to win some of these. Obviously non-conference games if they're going to do anything. Their conference schedule. I mean, it's tough to find the wins when they're going to be not favored in any of these games. So we don't have them really stepping up and being, a factor. I will say if there's a strong suit on their offense or on their team, it's going to be, I think, defensively on the defensive line. I think that, 3 starters coming back on that D line, Trevin Mason, Aaron Blackwell, and Jalen Harris. They're all, 2 seniors and a junior. I think that if you're going to see a bright spot for them, it's going to be that D line. I think that they can really kind of come together and do what they need to do. Yeah, offensively, and as among those 5 starters, it's 3 offensive linemen, a tight end, and 1 of the wide receivers. So, you don't return quarterback. That's important. Will Plummer, he's back as he'll end up being the 3rd string quarterback though. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
I think Jed Fish said it best. Their new head coach. When asked about realistic expectations, he said, "We're working on being the toughest team that anyone plays every week. Then we'll see what happens." I mean, hey, he knows it's going to be rough. That's the quote of a coach who's playing it safe and saying, "Hey,
we're going to try.
we're going to give it. We're going to give it our best effort." This is the worst roster in the Pac-12. And it got decimated too. I mean, this is going to be a big transition. This is a new coach, new staff, new culture, new system, new team. I mean, it's all of it. So schedule-wise, I mean, look, BYU at a conference, that's no joke. San Diego State at a conference, that's no joke. Northern Arizona, is that a for sure win? I don't know. 2-10, and they could lose that San Diego State game. So that could be 1-11. I don't see them getting the over on this win total, which is at 2.5. I don't see it. To quote Barton Simmons, I don't see it. Not on
I don't see 3 wins on this schedule.
Let's see on the schedule somewhere that I'm not looking at. Good. So to sum up the Pac-12 South, we've got USC followed by Utah, UCLA, Arizona State, Colorado, and Arizona. Be sure to follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob.